Welcome to Indie Dev Interview, Episode 1. Today's guest is Bog Hog. He is a game designer who works primarily in the shmup genre, and he recently worked on the game Gunvein that was released on Nintendo Switch and Steam by publisher NG Dev. Thanks for coming on the show, Bog Hog.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm just going to start off with the first question, and as we go, we might go a little bit off script, and that's totally cool. So, question one: from the first day working on Gunvein until its release on Steam, how long did the game take?
It was about a year. So when I joined in, like most of the assets and stuff were already finished. So I joined in like halfway through the development, and then when I joined in, it took like a year.
Oh wow, that's so that's
Yeah.
that's a pretty long journey from getting the game started to getting it actually released.
Oh yeah. Well, in dev time, it's pretty pretty small. Well, I guess it depends because arcade devs were brutal back in the day. They would push out like two games in a year. I don't know how they did that. That's insane.
Yeah, I think Mega Man
Yeah.
7 took like 9 months or something, which is
Oh yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
Um,
Cave would publish three games in a year sometimes. It's just wow.
Wow, that is pretty
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
So do you work full time as a game developer, or is this like a side gig or a part time thing for you?
It used to be a part-time, well, like a side gig hobbyist thing, but now I can actually work full-time. Well, I
Wow.
could work on Gunvein and stuff, and also an unannounced super secret project.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on making the transition to full
Thanks.
time. What
Thanks. Yeah, it's
experience
like,
did you have as a game developer to kind of get to that point? Did you work for a larger company at some point, or has it just been kind of independent work that's gotten more and more involved?
no, I just started making games one day from like 2013 well, no, actually 2014, 15, and then I just kept making stuff solo, posting it online, and eventually like people contacted me and I got some work.
Wow. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, so I was like a total newbie hobbyist.
Well, that's cool. I'm sure people listening out there, if they're interested in being a game developer, that's a cool story, cool perspective to hear.
Oh yeah,
Um,
if you're like if you're wondering how you get into that type of stuff, you need to the most important thing is just like community stuff, get into communities, talk to people. Like, when people say networking, right, people think you gotta like cynically approach people, but it doesn't have to be like that. If you're making a shmup, for example, or like a platformer, just get involved in like fan game communities, shmup communities, that kind of stuff.
if
It's
you
like natural
honestly
networking.
if you honestly have the same interests, then it's like a sincere form of networking, Like you're just
Absolutely, yeah. Like it doesn't feel dirty at all. It just feels like normal.
it would be weird if you were like, not interested in game design at all, but telling people that you wanted to get into it that would be strange. But yeah, networking, I've found if you're sincere about it and if you're actually interested in other people's projects, and think they might legitimately be interested in your project, then it's totally a cool, appropriate way to try to build your career.
Hell yeah, yeah. Nothing shameful about it at all.
Yeah. So, what development tools do you primarily use? Unity, Photoshop, Blender, any of those?
I use Game Maker for just like as my main engine. Then I use Blender for like 3D stuff. Clip Studio Paint instead of Photoshop is my go-to art program. I also use Procreate on the iPad. Also, Sprite for sprites for like pixel art. Sprite Mancer for VFX type of stuff. And FL Studio for sounds and music.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. So, quite a few different programs. And you said Game Maker's the engine that you're using?
Yeah, yeah, Game Maker Studio. It's like perfect for shmups almost. It runs on like time step, like time step logic, so you can immediately start building replays and all that type of stuff. It's
Oh,
really
wow.
convenient. And when it slows down, because it's time step, when it slows down, the whole game slows down. So it's like arcade slowdown built in.
If you don't mind me asking for our listeners, what is time step for a game developer, someone new to that?
Oh, it's like when some stuff is tied to frame rate instead of running on like independent timers. So, if you're playing a game and if you're playing like ikaruga and set it to 30 FPS, the whole game will start slowing down. But if you play like a modern shooter and set it to 30 FPS, you'll only like get frame rate you get choppy frame rate. So the difference is that the latter runs on like delta time or some independent timer, while the first one is time step. So it's like the timing of the game is dependent on the frame rate.
Okay, interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of extra work to port the game to Nintendo Switch?
Oh no, that's one of the benefits of using Game Maker. It's really convenient. Just basically just export it more or less.
Oh
You need
wow.
to tweak some stuff, but yeah, yeah, it's like very seamless.
And were you involved in any of that process of getting it on the Switch, or was that all the publisher in GDev?
Oh yeah, it was a little bit indirect, but like I had to adjust a bunch of stuff, just like optimize some stuff. But mostly it was like NG dev testing it and all that stuff.
Okay. The Switch Pers version is the one that I'll be playing. I picked it up. I downloaded it last night. So
Oh
I've been
hell
playing it
yeah,
a bit. I
hope
really
you
like
enjoy.
it. It's cool.
Nice.
Yeah. I feel like we can get as we talk more about shmup design specifically. I feel like it does work well on Switch. It's pretty cool. So how did you get the publishing deal with NG Dev? Was that just networking and kind of that kind of stuff?
Well, that was actually a funny story. It was networking originally. They were like asking me about because they wanted to switch to Game Maker and they were asking me some stuff. But later on, they sent me the demo of Gunvein, like an early demo, and asked me for feedback. And I gave them like a tome, a Bible of criticism, and they read that. They're like, "Can we just hire you? Can you just, can you just work on the game?" And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good." And I joined in, and that was
Oh,
that was really good.
so that was it for free? That initial input that you gave them was for free?
Oh yeah, yeah. The initial input was for free. I think they offered to pay me, but I'm like, nah, I'll just check it out. And
Yeah.
then and then I just hopped on board and worked on the
Well,
game.
that's a great way to do it. You offer your services, and if they like it, then it moves into a bigger position.
Yeah, in general, if you can offer like solid feedback to people, people really appreciate that. Just like playtest stuff, try to understand what they're going for. Yeah, they like solid feedback is always appreciated and it helps you network a lot.
How different is the game today than the version that you originally got? A year ago that you gave them the feedback on.
Very like I had to completely overhaul the mechanics pretty much.
Interesting.
The art stuff is basically the same with some tweaks. Like I added some parallax and stuff, but yeah, like it's mechanically it's very different.
Interesting. Okay. Um, so did you do everything for the game? I remember you did mention this, but did just if you don't mind for our listeners, it was a team collaboration, right, with the art and the music and all those other things.
Yeah, I got a bit lucky. I didn't have to like directly work with a team because I'm really horrible at that. Because you know I'm a solo dev, so I'm really like picky and demanding and annoying about that kind of stuff. But when I joined in, the most of the sprites were done, most of the backgrounds, like enemy sprites backgrounds were done. VFX were mostly done. The music was done. There was a lot of sound effects done. I added some sound effects myself. I made the final boss myself
Oh,
and
cool.
I added like a bunch of VFX stuff myself. But otherwise, I just focused on like gameplay programming and that kind of stuff.
Well,
But
so
yeah, there
far
was
from
a
what I've seen, the game looks great. So it's
thanks a
got a
lot.
cool
Yeah,
style to it.
it does look pretty cool. And there was an artist, another programmer on board, and a musician, as far as I know, and some extra stuff.
Did you feel that when you added your own art for the final boss, it was hard to adhere your style to that, or was it pretty much the same style that you
Oh
would have made?
yeah. Oh no, no. It took some time to actually try to like mimic the style of of the existing art. But yeah, like eventually it kind of clicked, and I didn't find it too. Though I was kind of nervous because you know I'm not used to uh, doing that kind of art stuff. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe this won't fit. Yeah, I had to just learn on the fly.
Well, that's cool though. That's pretty interesting that you wound up putting in the capstone, the final enemy in the game was made by you, even though all the other art was done first, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's like my mark on the game.
yeah, and designing it all and the
Yeah,
gameplay.
hell yeah. Yeah,
So
but you know the gameplay is a little bit invisible, but then the final boss is like a visible, tangible, you know,
yeah, yeah.
visual element. Yeah.
Have you been surprised by any of the strategies that players have come up with that you've seen them, play the game?
Uh, this will sound like I'm just trying to be too cool, but no, I'm not. I wasn't too surprised. Like there was some stuff, like for example, Zarok came up with a stage 2 strat where he like chained bombs over and over. It was like a whole 3 minutes or so of bomba, 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 and that was pretty funny. But overall, it went how I expected, which is a double-edged sword because in one at one in one way it's good because it means that I predicted like all the systems well, and in the other sense it's really lame because I was expecting some crazy finds and
Well,
stuff.
you never know too. Like I think the game does seem popular within the shmup scene. Like I've seen quite a few YouTubers discussing it and playing it.
Yeah,
And
maybe someone will find it something
yeah, I
crazy.
wouldn't be surprised if eventually some super player finds some sort of really interesting mechanic or even maybe a glitch or something and finds a way to do something really cool. Um, did you have any
Yeah,
super players or high score chasing players test the game, or did you primarily test it? Or
there were some high score players, like for example soft drink, but not like uh, the absolutes, like Jamers tier, right? uh the thing is, like with super players, they're often a bit too forgiving. They adapt pretty quickly, so
hmm,
if they ran into like a janky mechanic, they're like, I'll just learn this. There's one point where I was watching a player, like a really high level player, stream my previous game, and I was asking him, okay, it seemed like you were really frustrated during the stream. Should I change anything? He's like, nah, it's fine. And then I it went back to the stream, and he kept getting frustrated and restarting stage one over and over and over. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure about this, buddy.
was that previous game Mechanical Star Astra or another game?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mechanical Star Astra, the demo.
Okay. Um,
Yeah, yeah, the player was like stuck in restart hell, and I'm like, should I fix this? He's like, nah, it's fine. He's used to it.
well, he was, being an extreme player, he's probably used to starting the game over and over, until he gets the right run going.
Yeah, yeah,
But
exactly. And but like with the slightly lower level players, they kind of get annoyed at that stuff much easier. I think they haven't built up that tolerance. And soft drink in particular is very picky. Whenever I send him some builds, he's freaking blast them.
huh, that's
Yeah, and
hilarious.
that's really useful. Yeah, yeah. So there's like that disconnect, between player skill and just usefulness of feedback.
Yeah, that would be very hard to design around because you want your game. Everyone, I think, would like their game to be popular to a certain extent, right? And you don't want to alienate the new players, but also having that depth, inherently does create, a disconnect between brand new players and the super players, and what they desire from a game really might be different. So it's a very that's I
Absolutely,
think
yeah.
as we get into it, I think that is one of the biggest challenges facing the shmup genre of who do designers want to appeal to, new players or the hardcore, and how do you appeal to both, which I think is possible but very hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I noticed that there's a roguelike arrange mode in the game. Do you think roguelike design is the future for shmups, or do you think it's more still just a side thing?
I think there should be like a roguelike subgenre or space, within shmups where it's like a bunch of games that people can just play. And I think it makes for really fun like extra modes in these games because once you some people have like a limited patience for memorization, because some people love that stuff. I love that stuff, but some people want to just relax, like, and just try, improvise every run. And I think it'd be really useful if games started implementing that type of stuff. But no, I think it shouldn't override the main style of games. It just should be like an extra.
Yeah. I mean, part of me gets kind of nervous at the idea of like procedurally generated games, I don't know why. It just makes me feel like, oh, one of these days all the games will be procedurally generated. And I think people enjoy that they play the same thing, you know?
Exactly, yeah. There needs to be like that core of progression, because one of the big things for me is just uh, run to run. I want to feel like I'm getting better and better and better. And with roguelikes, they have that effect where because there's so many randomized elements, it's kind of hard to gauge your skill growth over time.
Yeah.
Like at first it's really good when you're like flailing, and then I assume when you master them, it's really good. But in that middle area, it's like, did I improve? Did I get lucky? I have no idea. Maybe a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
of both. Yeah,
Or
it's
did you
very
just, yeah, get totally unlucky and get a bad run? Yeah, I mean, I love the roguelike. I like that. I do like roguelike games and procedurally generated games, but I do sometimes think about, okay, in the future, are they all going to be procedurally generated? And I don't
Yeah,
think so, but it's a
I
mixed
think
bag
there's
for me.
always I think there's always going to be a space for handcrafted stuff, because especially because it's such a different experience. Like you can't replace that with roguelikes. But it would be cool if just they could coexist and help each other out. You play
Yeah,
your hardcore memo shmup, then you go play a roguelike, then you come back. Go back and forth.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your history with shmups? Did you play them growing up or get into them recently or?
Uh, yeah, I played a few growing up, but I wasn't too into the genre. I got into it properly in like 2013 or something when I played when I was playing a bunch of DS games and I played the Nano Stray games and the
Mhm.
Contra 4 also. So I was
Huh.
like, and what I realized is that oh shit, oh damn, these games capture that fun that I felt when playing a lot of NES games growing up.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, like that, one more run, because back when I played them as a kid, I used credits, but it was still challenging enough for me that it felt like at the end of the run there was that massive tension, can I make it or can I not? And I realized, oh, this whole genre is like that. And then I tried out some Saturn shmups, basically,
Hmm.
and that was the proper beginning of that was when I fell in love with the genre. Then I found like the STG Weekly channel, which breaks down shmup replays and talks about like high level techniques. I found the forums and I properly like got obsessed with the genre for quite a while.
What Saturn games particular stood out to you as you got into them?
Oh, the first two that I really fell in love with were Dodonpachi and Ray Force,
Oh,
or
cool.
Layer Section. Yeah, those are amazing. And
I've
like,
never played one
uh,
of those, but Ray Force I've heard is cheaper than a lot of the other Saturn games. That's kind of its claim to fame is that it's very available, which is kind of cool.
yeah, you should really check it out. Or nowadays it's a lot. Nowadays there's the Ray Z collection which you can check out. So you don't even need a proper Saturn. And those games are like amazing on a visceral level. Because after I played them, I felt like, oh damn, those NES, SNES, and Genesis games I played are like imitations of this style. Because when you play it on Apache, everything just explodes in these massive explosions. You're like, oh my god, this is what I wanted. This is what Mega Man has been building me up to in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah, for me it was like a really natural progression.
I have a USB Saturn controller that I use for Nintendo Switch when I plug it into TV and for my computer. And I love the Saturn controller design. I just feel like I don't know,
Oh
it
yeah,
just
the
fits
D-pad
so.
is really good, right?
Yeah, it's such a
Yeah, a
it's
lot of
awesome.
yeah, I've heard that a lot of shmup players actually prefer the Saturn pad because it has a really good D-pad.
That's what I'd heard, and I figured I'd buy one because they're pretty cheap. They're from Retrobit, I think is the company that makes them,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. Um,
Yeah, it seems pretty
so
sweet.
what is your favorite shmup? If you had to pick, I know it might be hard to pick a favorite, but what's one that like stands out to you more that you really like?
Oh, I actually do have. Well, there's like two games. Or I guess. Okay, so my favorite as a player is Psy Warrior Revision.
Huh.
There's a Psy Warrior, yeah, Psy Warrior Delta version of it that's on PC, Switch, and all the modern consoles. And yeah, that game is amazing because it's so elegant, it's so fun, it's so simple, but like there's a lot of depth to it. It's grazing based. So basically, when you get close to a bullet, without touching, when your sprite touches the bullet without your hitbox touching it, you get like more points, and those points give you experience. And once you get enough experience, you level up, and that level up gives you iframes, which you then use to graze even more bullets and get even more experience and more level ups. And you can get like chain these iframes. It's very aggressive, really fast paced.
Huh. I've never
So
even heard of that
yeah,
one. Is it a modern
oh
game?
yeah, it is. It came out in the early 2000s, but it got decent ports recently-ish.
Okay, cool.
And
Psy Warrior?
yeah, it's Psy Warrior, like Psy, psychic, and Warrior, not as in war. Oh God, how do I even? I'll
I'll get
just
some footage and I'll put it up during the when I edit it so our
yeah, 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 yeah.
listeners can
Just
see
put
it.
put the text. Yep, Psy Warrior. Yeah, another feature it has that's really interesting. I'm just gonna sell people on my favorite game is that it has a system where you unlock levels by leveling up yourself.
Oh, interesting.
Levels as in like stages. So the better you are at scoring, the more levels you will unlock.
Oh wow, that is
to
interesting.
yeah, it is really cool. When you first try it, when you first like try to play it, you might even once you see it because you'll only play the easy levels, and and you're like, okay, so I played this. This is like 15 minutes long. What is this? But then you go back and try to get higher scores, and you'll unlock more and more stuff. It like unwraps. There's like layers to it. I love it.
Oh wow, that does sound really interesting.
Yeah, and another one that's less. I enjoy it less as a player, but it's like constant inspiration for me is Guange by Cave. That one is really unique as well because you have this spirit. It's called Shiki, and you kind of move it as like a cursor. And those Cabal shooters like Wild Guns Reloaded or Sin and Punishment. You
Yeah.
move it. You move the cursor, and whenever you kill an enemy, you can use it to wipe away enemy bullets. So like you control two objects on the screen. The cursor is invincible, and your character can take damage. And it's really dynamic, really interesting. There's like a lot of stuff to it.
Huh, that sounds really cool. Um,
Yeah.
so this is a interesting. My next question is, what is your least favorite shmup? And I can go first. I had a really I played a lot of ikaruga when I was a teenager.
Oh
Something
boy.
about it just really fascinated me. And I know that some people who are really into the shmup genre don't love that game. And I understand kind of both perspectives, but I played that game a lot as a kid, and then my friend got a Neo Geo collection. And I can't even remember what the game is called, but I'll put footage up for it. I'll find it and put footage up. But I played this other shmup that was a horizontal shmup on a Neo Geo collection on the Wii, and you couldn't see any of the bullets, and it was awful. I think it was called like Last Resort or something like that. So that's my least favorite shmup. And it was interesting because it made me appreciate Ikaruga way more. I realized, okay, not all of these games are equal. But what's your least favorite shmup? If you had to pick one that you're like, dude, I don't like this one.
Yeah, for me, it's like there's two. There's a Super R-Type, which is not that bad of a game, but when I played it when I was a kid, I played it on the SNES, and I hated it. I could not stand it. So it like turned me off shmups for quite a while.
Was
Even though
that the
the
one
game
with the
itself
really
is,
bad slowdown?
yeah, it has a lot of slowdown, and it's just like the style of game. Like I wasn't ready for it. My power level was too low, because it's extremely memo based,
Yeah.
extremely like it feels like cheap. Sometimes the
And I think if you
hitboxes are
die, you start
massive.
over at the beginning of the level, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you start at a checkpoint and you lose all your power-ups, so you can like get hard stuck at some checkpoints, repeating them over and over. And I played that as a kid, and I was like, oh god, I must hate shmups, and that almost turned me off the whole genre. And another one is Raptor Call of the Shadows. It's a DOS PC game, and I hate that game. It's like the most miserable experience I've had in the shmup because just the enemy waves are all the same, the weapons feel weak, it's all gray, all the levels look the same. It's like
That's a cool name,
miserable.
though. Raptor Call of the
It is a
Shadows.
cool name, yeah. It lures you in, it's like cool aesthetic, cool like basic graphics, cool name, but then it's like
Yeah.
plotting. Yeah.
So, what aspects of other genres do you think shmup designers could learn from? And actually, for our listeners, if we somehow got someone this deep in who doesn't know what a shmup is, would we agree that a shmup is a game that is scrolling, right? Where you can move the player in 8 different directions and there's dodging and shooting. Would that be like the baseline foundation of what you would call a shmup?
Oh damn, you caught me off guard here. Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
I don't
sorry, I
know.
didn't mean to.
I'd need to come up with like a concise definition, but
But
you really
either, but
put
so just so our users know, like shmups. I'll
yeah.
put
So
footage
so
up.
basic. Yeah, so it's like a vertically, horizontally scrolling game usually, where you move and shoot enemies. They come in like waves, time-based usually. Um, yeah, and
Yeah.
there's just very simple, fundamental games.
So
Space
considering what a
Invaders.
shmup is, what could other designers or genres learn from the shmup game? What do you think?
Oh well, from just like those basic mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, like what I think is what really stands out to me is I play a lot of because I do. I mean, I play a lot of games. Um, the shmup game is so good. Mark on Electric Underground has called it gameplay density. Shmup games are
Yeah,
so good at
density.
like keeping the player engaged in the sense of here's the challenge, here's your decisions, here's how you play the game, right? And there's some non shmup games now. more and more. Like God of War is a perfect example. I felt like there was so much time just walking around.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
And
I think
so,
that's not. Yeah, I think that's not even like exclusive to shmups necessarily, but more of an arcade thing in general. I think with shmups, there's like a lot of structural stuff that games could learn, or just certain types of design. For example, I think JRPGs could learn some some stuff from shmups. Ironically, not in terms of pacing, but there's a certain style of shmups called caravan shmups, which is a you kill enemy. It's like a score. It's like a scoring system where when you kill an enemy wave, the next enemy wave spawns immediately, right? So the faster you kill waves, the more of them will spawn, and the more score you'll get. It's like usually timed. You have like 2 seconds to kill as many waves as possible. So, what? Imagine a JRPG using this kind of system for random encounters or something like that, where instead of just being these long, boring slogs, you try to quick kill a bunch of enemies, like optimize it. You know?
oh yeah, yeah. That actually, if you had an active time system in an RPG and some sort of way in which you could pick the player's appropriate attack at the right time, that could kind of lead into like almost like a chaining or combo system in an RPG, right? Like as the waves of
Yeah,
enemy.
or it could be like based on how many turns you took. Like you have like a total amount of turns, and you could like, for example, you could finish off enemies really optimally and then spawn more enemies and get some kind of bonuses for that. I don't know, like spitballing ideas, but there's like a lot of these little nuances games could learn. Another thing I would love to see in other games that shmups have is practice modes,
Hmm.
because so many, you know how all these discussions go, like for example, should Dark Souls be easier, should this be easier,
Yeah.
should games have long levels with no checkpoints, that kind of stuff. All these discussions would be immediately solved if you had like the main game and the practice mode, and the main game is like strict, brutal, very developer driven, and then the practice mode just lets you boot up any part of the game, practice however you want, just
Yeah.
really experiment. So that way you could like get that convenient learning experience, but also like the really strict, challenging main game.
Did you ever play the first Halo game?
No, I haven't.
So Halo 1, I don't know if the other Halos do this, but I know Halo 1 does it. Halo 1 has four different difficulty settings: easy, medium, heroic, and legendary.
Oh
And
yeah, I've heard stories.
yeah. And on the heroic setting, when you set it to that, there's a little like message and it says this is the way the game was meant to be played, you know?
Hell yeah.
And I wish that I've played Dark Souls. I love Dark Souls, right? And I understand that there are some people, who literally might not be able to beat it. Maybe they're even disabled, right? And they want to play the game. I don't think
Yeah.
it would hurt Dark Souls if there was this easy setting, as long as the designers had an optimized setting that they said, if you can do it, this is the setting that the game is meant to be played on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes both ways as well. So if you're like, if you advocate for easy difficulties, then you can be like, okay, but now I also want even harder stuff as well.
Yeah, and that was, I don't know if you're a Mario fan, but Mario Odyssey is shockingly easy. And I really wish that there was that they
Dude, Kirby games are like the
Yeah,
worst
yeah.
example of this. People are like begging Nintendo, please put in like super hard difficult modes, please. The mechanics are fun, the visuals are cool, the music, all that stuff is perfect. Just make them difficult, please.
Yeah. Yeah, they almost
Yeah,
feel like a tech demo sometimes because they're just like
yeah, they really do. Yeah,
they're like nothing.
yeah,
uh yeah, that
yeah.
that's a whole nother one. Did you ever play Kirby the All-Star Collection on Super Nintendo?
Oh yeah, I have.
I remember renting that as a kid, and I wasn't very great at video games when I was a kid. And I remember being like,
Like,
this is just so easy.
yeah, yeah, and that's one of the more challenging ones as well, as far as I know. Maybe the newer one are tougher, but yeah,
Now,
it's
this is a
rough
little
with
bit off
Kirby.
script, but I had this conversation with Mark from the Electric Underground talking about surprise shmup levels in
Oh boy.
other genres. And Kirby All Stars, I can't remember all the details of it, but it does have a surprise shmup level in it. Um, have you ever played any games that have surprise shmup levels, and did you like them, or did you appreciate the
I
surprise, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've played a bunch, but like I don't think I've liked a single one. Maybe if you count it, Kid Icarus Uprisings, like the shmup sections, the rail shmup sections, those
Oh
were fun. But yeah, but like Nier Automata, it's like it's not
yeah,
bad. The intro one, it's not bad, but it's not great either.
you
Then
kind of have this. tension. Well, I didn't. I don't have that tension because I didn't design those games. But I think like if you've played Call of Duty and or Shenmue, there's games where there's moments where the A button will flash on the screen and be like press A, and then your character will do something in a cutscene, right?
Oh
And
yeah, the good old QTs, yeah.
I don't know anybody who really actually likes those. You know that it's strange that they keep coming up in games. And sometimes I feel like a on rails shmup section could allow designers to have a more cinematic moment where the player has limited control but still have it be exciting and have good gameplay. It's just hard to know how difficult they would have to make that rails moment, you know, to actually make it something that's
Yeah,
not like a
it's
choke point.
yeah. That's a my first game was like this run and gun and shmup hybrid, and I actually struggled with this because I wanted run and gun players to primarily play this. So when I was putting all these shmup patterns in, a lot of the playtesters really struggled with really basic shmup patterns, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know what to do about this because when you pick up some basic shmup skills, these patterns become easy, but if you don't have them, it's nightmarish.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's that tension. Like you can't make them too difficult. But I think what you can do is just avoid those really obscure niche styles of shmups like bullet hell. Because if the hitboxes are big enough, you can have these nice discrete clear attacks and stuff. And a good example of this would be Sin and Punishment too, especially too, because it has all these different gameplay styles, and they have that connecting thread of just that cursor on the screen. It goes from like a twin stick shmup. It has some platforming sections. It has some on rails bike sections. It has some flying sections. It all feels coherent, and it's all really really flashy because you like fly through these really in depth, cool environments.
Yeah, I think that, that.
Yeah, like
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
like
go ahead.
coherence. Yeah, coherence is like the most important part, I think,
And I think
between like
that
the main game mechanics and shmups sections.
an auto-scrolling shmup style of game could be the best way to create a very flashy cinematic game. Almost,
Absolutely.
the opposite. I think the design philosophy behind, many of the modern kind of walking simulator games to me is like the opposite of the direction they should go if they want to make a flashy game. Um, I've never played Sin and Punishment. You're talking about the one on the
Oh,
Wii,
you
right?
must. Yeah, yeah, the Wii one, the
I've
Wii
seen
sequel.
it,
You
and it does
should.
look incredible.
That is, yeah, that is one of the flashiest games you'll ever play. I swear
I
to
mean,
God.
it's way more flashy and cinematic than anything you see in God of War. And yet, God of
Absolutely,
War
yeah.
has you walking for the sake of the cinematic storytelling?
Yeah, Kid Icarus Uprising is like that as well, actually, because
Oh,
those
interesting.
on-rail sections, like they take you all over the place. That game is pretty cool. Yeah, it's really cinematic. It feels cool, the levels feel really big because you're flying really fast. There's all kinds of set pieces that they could do. Yeah, it's definitely something more mainstream developers could take advantage of.
Yeah. So this might be kind of a similar idea to what we've already talked about, but are there any other game genres? So you said RPGs and these cinematic games that could be improved by taking on some of the design ideas of shmups. Are there any other game genres that you could think of that you'd like to see more of the shmup design ideas, like density or
Yeah, like I would want to see them everywhere. Like I want every single developer to play them. But like for example, FPS and third-person shooter games, they could really benefit from a shmup style feedback. Because if there's anything shmups are really amazing at, is just like creating these really satisfying guns and stuff, explosions. Like
mm,
they're so over the top and crazy. When you go back and play FPS games, like a dude just like fell down after I shot him. Okay, that's you
I
know,
haven't
you
played a
know.
lot of it, but have you seen the new Doom games? There's two new Doom
Oh yeah,
games.
yeah, yeah. The Doom games are really good at that, and I think part of them are actually inspired by
Yeah,
shmups.
I was gonna say
Yeah,
when you kill the guys and the power ups pour out of them, I'm like
yeah,
that
yeah.
looks
That's
very
amazing.
shmup like.
Yeah, it's very cartoony as well. The first, well, not the first, but the 2016 one even has a scoring system. It has an arcade mode with
Oh,
lives and
cool.
a scoring system. Yeah, so they know what they're doing. We see you developers. So
Yeah,
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 like yeah, and with TPS, I love Max Payne, for example, but the hit feedback there is like nothing. You shoot dudes, and they barely react. Like you shoot down a plane in the shmup, and like the screen just gets covered in debris and explosions and all that stuff.
yeah.
It's just crazy. Yeah, and I want that kind of destruction in third-person shooters.
Now scoring systems, and this is also a little bit off script. You did have a YouTube video where you're talking about designing satisfying scoring systems.
Oh
And
yeah.
I kind of have the idea that I don't, if a developer thinks about a scoring system, I think they should implement scoring systems in more games because it adds, it really shows how fun the game actually is if people want to push the scores. But then also, I love Mega Man games because I've been reviewing those. And Mega Man 1 has infamously one of the most pointless scoring systems ever that really does distract and really does kind of
Yeah.
harm the value of the game because especially people playing it not knowing that it's pointless might even wonder why am I getting this weird score. So do you think more
Yeah.
games should implement scoring systems like shmups, and if so, how do you think those scoring systems should be designed potentially?
Yeah, I do think they should. The problem with like those older broken, busted scoring systems is that they were implemented not because the developers were interested in scoring, but it's like, oh, the arcades do that, so we'll just do that. They haven't really considered how the elements feed into it. And in Mega Man's case, they haven't thought about like what is the fun element of Mega Man? What should we encourage? With Mega Man Zero, for example, there's like that simple ranking system, scoring and rank system, and they really thought about like, hey, we want the player to go fast, we want the player to play stylishly, not take damage, not use these crutch type of items, and I think that works out a lot better. So yeah, the main thing is just like try, developers. If developers are interested in scoring, they should pay attention to what kind of gameplay they want to encourage, and then build the scoring to incentivize those behaviors
Yeah.
and then just like build on top of that, add more and more optimizations.
Did you play the game Sekiro Shadows Die Twice?
Yeah, yeah, I have.
I really liked that game, and I thought maybe I'm missing something. It doesn't have a scoring system, and I feel like that game really
Yeah, it
would
doesn't.
benefit from a cool scoring system.
It kind of would, yeah. Imagine like a rhythm game scoring system. That would be really silly. But I'd really appreciate it. Where like the better you time stuff, the better you time your deflect, and the quicker you take down bosses, the more score you get. That would be. I think a lot of people will hate it because it distracts from like the serious nature of the game. The what is it called? The
Yeah, yeah,
diegetic
the
mechanics.
sin or the
The
narrative
ludonarrative
some
dissonance, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, but imagine that as like just a fun extra mode. That would be a lot of fun, and will give the game a lot of depth instead of just like either you survive the boss or don't. And
And
oh yeah, and the thing is like nowadays, back in the day, the Mega Man developers didn't have as much access to it. But nowadays, Mega Man developers could literally go online and see what challenge runs are really popular, what kind of speedrun categories are popular, and then think, okay, how can I build a scoring to make this even more fun?
yeah. No, yeah,
Yeah,
I do think they should consider it. And from a business standpoint, it adds legs to your game because when people start pushing the scoring system, that's good publicity for your game. It draws other people to it.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it doesn't have that much of an impact overall, but still, it gives it longevity and just it's like a gift to the fans, I guess.
Yeah. So overall, do you think the shmup genre is in a healthy state? And what would you like to see in the future for the shmup genre?
I think it's like semi-healthy. When I got into it, it was pretty grim. I was like, so some of those years, you're like, oh God, is it over, fellas? Is the dream dead? But no, nowadays it's like more. It's like a lot of the more toxic communities kind of died off, and the newer communities that are a lot more helpful and just positive, encouraging, and all that stuff. They're still a little bit elitist, but it's just part of the nature of the genre. You
Yeah.
play. It's like a skill based genre, so there's always going to be like some elitism.
Yeah.
What I like yeah, what I'd like is just for players, I'd like them to make more content. Honestly, that's a little bit selfish, but also I think it does help a lot. Like for example, look at what fighting game developers have done. They've
Yeah.
created all these amazing guides, like commentary videos, events, all that kind of stuff, and it really it helps people get into the genre and creates like these community hubs that they can be centered around.
I don't know if you were into this scene particularly, but back in like 2007, 8, 9, there was like Screw Attack and game trailers were really into fighting
Oh
games
yeah,
and classic game room and stuff like that. And the fighting game buzz, fighting games, at least from my perspective, before Street Fighter 4 were pretty dry. There was not a lot of fighting games coming out,
yeah,
and they
definitely.
and there was that excitement and energy. And fighting games have had ups and downs since then, but I feel like the genre has stayed healthy. Um, because of people making content, like what you're saying, people hosting tournaments and things like that. Shmups are in
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
hard situation because it's a skill-based
They're not
genre.
social. And
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
social, yeah.
yeah. That's what I was just gonna
Yes,
say,
so
that shmups are almost antisocial because you almost everyone who's a high-level player plays them alone.
yeah, they like they're locked in a mountain shed somewhere, just have a long beard, covering, like a length beard, and just playing a shmup for 20 years, then come down from the mountain to share their replay.
Which is
Yeah,
such Yeah, it's such a weird
yeah,
thing too because I think about like have you ever played Battle Garega?
yeah. I have played Battleground.
I I mean I like that game and I think it's an interesting game, but I was playing it and I cannot understand how anyone would ever go to an arcade, put in a dollar or a quarter or whatever, and have a fun time the first time they play that game, you know?
Yeah, that game is an absolute nightmare of the learning curve is an absolute nightmare. It has so many like little subsystems and just obscure mechanics that you have to figure out. You can't even figure it out yourself. You have to like work with the community or just basically yeah,
And
just go on forums and see these.
I think that
Yeah,
mystery
it does
could be
draw
what would
people in,
build a
yeah.
shmup community, like people wanting to unravel the games and find the mystery. And I think that could be where the community could come together.
Yeah, but like you need that initial hook, right? Because you need some guy to like be idly clicking through videos and say, "Oh, this Shimon video." They click on the video and it hooks them. It gives them something interesting, like, "Oh, look at this battle Garega mechanic where you it ties lives to score to bombs, and then you have like this whole closed economy of the game." And they're like, "Oh, this is interesting," and they start going down that like rabbit hole of shmups. So you need a lot of content to kind of draw people in. And
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
developers, yeah, and from the developers, I'd like a more serious understanding of how to just bring the hardcore elements of shmups into more casual style games. Just have some shmups. For starters, have shmups with decently balanced checkpoints.
Yeah.
Yeah, like where you Mega Man is actually a perfect example because you can play a Mega. I have once CC'd a few Mega Man games, but like I don't play them for that. I play them for the checkpoints, and finish them. I'm like, oh, that was good. That was cool. That was nice. Sometimes I like play levels to get higher ranks in like Zero and ZX, but for the most part, I can just play the game and know that I'll be satisfied. But shmups, you either go for a 1cc or you credit feed, which is boring as hell. And
Yeah.
there's like everything in between feels really arbitrary and kind of meaningless. You have to give it meaning yourself or find meaning in the community.
I have a long-term years out kind of dream game that I want to design and it
Yeah,
would be potentially a Metroidvania style game. But then like how Mario 64 how you go into paintings,
yeah,
there would be recorded war battles that the player would go into, and the war battles would be from the perspective of a shmup. And it would be little bite-sized challenges that if you could do them right, they would only be a minute long. And the player would unlock more of the castle as they would go through these little challenges because you'd get like not stars, but you would get whatever needed to open the next part of the castle, and they'd get progressively harder. And I think that you're right. Like checkpoints could be the secret to making these incredibly challenging little bite-sized moments more palatable for people who want to get into the genre. Granted, it's going to take me years to get good enough at design to pull something like that off. But I think that there's a novelty of like people watching other people play games and people watching someone do something impressive, right? And then, like if the shmups had a better checkpoint system, that enabled people to play it for a moment and die and then not be like super penalized. There could even be like pass the controller, everyone take a chance to see if you can get past this one little choke point in the game. So yeah, I think you're right. Checkpoints would be a huge way to really open the genre up, I think.
yeah. And the thing with like impressive gameplay is that you kind of need like that baseline of understanding of a game to really appreciate it, right? That's part of the reason why a lot of speedruns are really popular because people played Mario, so they kind of have an understanding of what a good what a good fast run is.
Yeah.
And
And
they kind of yeah.
shmups do have the
Yeah, shmup.
advantage that like
Yeah.
you can easily look at the game and look at your ship and look at the bullets, and even my mom who doesn't play any video games could see it and be like, I know the little ship is trying to dodge those bullets.
Yeah, but then you have that tricky thing where a lot of shmups that are extremely difficult look really easy because there's like a low bullet count, and people are like, "Oh, this is easy," but then you actually play them, they're nightmarish. So
Yeah.
you know, you need people to have that baseline to really appreciate stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with your game idea, yeah, that's a good idea. Because think about like RPGs, they've tried just about every genre. Like most action RPGs nowadays are like beat 'em up RPG hybrids,
Yeah.
right? So why not just have a shmup action RPG that doesn't suck? Because a lot of these attempts are kind of like meh, you know, that they don't they they're made by fans of RPGs that use shmups as like a just like a battle system instead of shmup developers, shmup fans that are trying to like make an RPG. And I think that's the wrong direction to go from. You need that like fundamental understanding of the genre to then bring it over to other stuff.
Yeah. I believe it was on your Twitter, that you were gonna make working on a shmup beat 'em up hybrid. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's
do,
gonna be yeah.
do you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, that's gonna be uh yeah, it's gonna be like a top-down beat 'em up with a lot of shmup elements. So there's gonna be dynamic enemies like beat 'em ups, like in Devil May Cry. So there's gonna be a lot of weapons that you can use. You can do some combos and stuff. And there's gonna be dense shmup patterns and bosses sometimes. The idea is to kind of combine both of them so they don't clash, so they don't feel like distinct phases. So you're always switching between ranged and melee. And the idea, the structure idea I have is just making it closer to something like a platinum game, where you have a manual scrolling uh, in between fights. Then when you reach a fight, it auto scrolls or locks you in a screen, and enemies spawn in. Then when you beat some enemies, it gives you like a rank screen, and you have that kind of structure that's more familiar. And
Oh
then in
yeah.
arcade mode, yeah, yeah. So I wanna make it longer than most shmups, but then just split it up into routes for arcade mode, so you can
Wow.
have like yeah, so you can have a lot of levels but split into routes. So it's not like you try to 1cc and it's like 2 hours. You're like, oh my god, I can't do this.
But then there could be a route that could be faster potentially, like for a player who
Oh,
wanted.
yeah. The idea would be something like most routes would take 20 to 30 minutes or something, and some would be harder, some would be easier, and different routes would give you different weapons. So there could be like a strategy element to that as well.
That's a really cool idea, and that's kind of what you were saying about checkpoints, right? Is that there would be moments of manual scrolling, and then a checkpoint, and then a battle, and then a
Yeah, yeah.
checkpoint.
For what I want to do is just like have a story mode where I just focus on the kind of checkpoint based gameplay where players can beat a level and move on. They don't have to replay it over and over to get a 1cc. And then just focus on making the 1cc's really fun in arcade mode.
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I think I think that's a good balance for games, but it is tricky, right? Because sometimes the two clash. For example, if you're play if you're playing a based game, like a boss with a lot of RNG can actually be really fun because you just replay the same checkpoint over and over. But in a shmup, it can be an absolute nightmare, especially if it comes like in the middle of your run, where
yeah.
you can just get messed up by RNG. It's like, okay, yeah. So
Would
so you're
you?
kind of making two different games side by side.
I mean, that sounds like a really cool idea. Would you consider working with NG Dev on that game, or is that going to be a totally solo project?
Well, maybe I'm not sure actually. Like I'll have to think. I'll have to just see where it goes. Right now, I'm just like trying to set up the basics, so I'm totally confident that I can pull this off.
Yeah.
So I need to set up the scrolling, the enemy types, and just like find a good flow for the combat. That's really important.
I think it sounds
And
like a
then
really cool
I'll.
idea.
Oh, I hope it'll be cool. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
So do you think the shmup genre has the potential for a huge mainstream hit? And by huge mainstream hit, I mean like a Undertale, which I know is a little bit contentious, or Cuphead, or which also has little shmup levels. But do you think like just a pure shmup game could have a big, mainstream hit?
Yeah, I wrote those down actually. Cuphead, Nier Automata, Undertale, Nuclear Throne, Gungeon, Furry. Yeah, Fury, not Furry. Oh, whoops. Okay, so yeah, I don't think pure arcade shmups can become popular. They're way too like they're really niche. They're like an acquired taste basically. I feel like you need to be really into action games and really into like specific optimization style play styles of action games to really be into shmups. But I think there could be a game which is basically a shmup, but just like strays away from the conventions. Which it has checkpoints, has really pretty graphics. Maybe it has like really dynamic like mixing like really dynamic auto scrolling and all that stuff. Really focused on instead of like those movement fundamentals because those can be really obscure and hard to understand or rather like they're easy to understand but it's hard to understand what the application of different moves is. They would be mechanics focused, so like have a lot of weapons, have a lot of distinct utility stuff. That could become really popular, but I think the problem is that people would just not consider that a shmup because look what
Mm.
happened with the 2D beat 'em ups. You had like Final Fight, Streets of Rage, all that stuff. They were developing fine, and then Devil May Cry came out, and you're like, okay, this is just a 2D beat 'em up, but a lot more mainstream. But nope, it just got split away from the 2D beat 'em up genre and isolated into its own category. A lot of people don't even realize that games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, all that stuff are really just beat 'em ups.
Yeah.
Just beat 'em ups. Yeah, they're like, oh, character action, stylish. Yeah, so what will happen with the shmups is going to be like a stylish spectacle bullet action or something, you know? And
Yeah.
people, yeah, it won't save the genre, but yeah, I think it's possible to have
Here's a
to have a
weird thing
game
to think
succeed.
about. As I was thinking about this mainstream shmup hit idea, could it happen? What would it look like? I grew up in an super rural part of the United States, like very hours away from the nearest big city, and the big city wasn't big, right? Like very
Yeah,
far out there, right? And when I was a kid, on the internet, I thought, even though I wasn't around for it, right? I thought arcades were like super cool, right? And they had this allure to me, right? And the only place even resembling an arcade was a pizza place nearby that had like a Cruisin' USA and like one like a Street Fighter game and some pinball machines, right? So
yeah, yeah.
all the way out in the middle of nowhere, when I was a teenager, I just got this random idea to check out the laundromat that was in uh like a small little grocery store, and they had UN Squadron in the laundromat.
Nice, yeah.
And so I think back on that moment, I'm like, some guy or gal, I don't know, someone in the year 2007 moved a UN squadron machine all the way out to the middle of nowhere, rural Washington, into a laundromat. And so I'm like,
What a king or queen, dude.
yeah, yeah. And so the shmup genre must have some sort of financial incentive for a total normie laundromat owner person to be somehow connected with someone who would own and build, because arcade machines are not cheap, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so at some point, the shmup genre must have represented some amount of big money to where normie people would invest in these machines and move them places. And
Yep.
so I wonder, like, what has changed. I mean, a lot has changed in the world over the years since the arcade boom. But the genre does have the potential, to draw people's interest and to draw their money. But you're right. Like, would something like how Devil May Cry is a beat 'em up, but it's not even called a beat 'em up? Would the
Yeah, yeah,
mainstream
no.
shmup not even be called a shmup? I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Well, yeah. Look at what happened with Cuphead. Because when it came out, like a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is gonna get people into shmups," but no, it didn't. Like, there's barely anyone that got into shmups through Cuphead.
Yeah,
Same with Undertale. I'm not sure if it created any Toho fans or anything. Maybe like a few, but I'm not. It didn't cause like this big wave where like communities of shmup fans get assaulted by new fans. Yeah, I think yeah. The main thing that changed is just like the gap between because back in the day you could have like small teams of just a few people making these really impressive technical showcases of games, and now that gap has increased more and more and more, and shmup design itself has gotten really like not outdated in a bad way, but like outdated. People aren't used to it. It feels alien. You don't have any progression systems. You don't have checkpoints even, and the developers haven't adapted at all. They just stuck with what worked before. So what we have now is basically like this genre that's like unlike anything else besides like other arcade games and maybe some roguelikes.
yeah,
But that's it, like action roguelikes. So yeah, the people don't even have like the language to talk about these games very much. So yeah, it's just this weird genre. It would have to like completely reshape itself to fit like what the modern players understand, can like speak their language more.
Yeah. Or some sort of weird situation where like a celebrity is like, "Oh yeah, by the way, my favorite game is
Oh, dude,
Ketsui."
that actually happened with Yoko Taro, the near writer, right?
Yeah.
He put out a list of his favorite games, and it was like Ikaruga, Rayforce, Dodonpachi, Daiojo, and all these games, and no one paid attention. No one cared. It's like, oh,
Oh wow.
yeah, people are like, oh, he's so quirky, haha, and no one actually checked these games out. There's this interest that a lot of developers have, and what I think is they the okay, so a lot of developers flirt with shmups. They have an
Yeah.
interest in them, they pay attention. They're like, oh, this is a very interesting genre to pay attention to, but they don't commit. They don't make these high budget games that are shmups, and they don't like really aggressively promote the genre. And I think it's because one of the really cool things about shmups that appeals to designers and arcade players is they're really elegant. So
Yeah.
they see that elegance and they can't help but admire that a little bit.
Well,
But
it's
they don't
very
want to
pure.
stake their careers on it. Yeah, yeah, it's like a very fundamental based,
It's
very
almost
elegant.
like it's weird because like like chess, right? Like chess is
Yeah,
the purest, maybe not the purest, but I know it's like a super pure strategy game, right?
yeah,
Well, a shmup is like a well-made shmup is a super pure test of reflexes and skill, right? And so
yeah,
there is something that I think even game designers that aren't interested in the shmup genre are drawn to it, at some point at
yeah.
least.
And my favorite is all those musicians who have like gigabytes of shmup music on their hard drives, but have never played a shmup. They're like this is just amazing. I just love the music,
Okay,
but I can't get into the games.
that's a question that popped up in my mind as we went through this. Shmup games have some of the coolest aesthetic ever. If you consider that there's since the year 1995 to now, right? There have not been a ton of shmups if you compare it to how many first person shooters have been made, right? There's been a limited
Yeah.
number of shmups, but the number of shmups that like look and sound wonderful is very high. There's a lot of beautifully sounding and looking shmups. What do you think it is about the shmup genre that draws out that artistic, expression, either in music or visuals? If you agree?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's just like the abstraction of it all. They let because a big problem with modern game soundtracks and stuff, why a lot of stuff sounds kind of bland, is that they try to make it diegetic, they try to make it fit the environments, but in shmups it's so abstract, like the game style is so wacky, abstract, and like you can't make them very believable. There's a very hard cap to how believable they can be. So what developers do, they just let musicians go nuts, just like, okay, here's a game, just compose the biggest banger of a soundtrack you've ever made. Doesn't matter if it fits that well, it'll create its own mood, and you have these like slightly clashing elements, and just a lot of different artists just freely making stuff they think is cool without worrying too much about like all these how it'll fit the scene, how cinematic it'll be, and you have these clashing elements just combining into something really beautiful. And I love
Yeah.
the like. I honestly love the numbers and stuff like these HUD elements. That's part of the thing. That's one of the things that attracted me to the genre. All those like mysterious, multipliers, mysterious like little meters. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
damn.
yeah. I
Yeah,
love that about
it's
Gunvein. That Gunvein's got the bomb parts, and then I think it's ready that's filling up, and there's all those little fun mechanics. Like you're right, the numbers and all the little things coming. It's almost like a slot machine, like a shmup
yeah,
game,
it's
right?
like yeah, it's like that arcade aesthetic. Just a bunch of numbers, and you kind of wanna you feel like it's super technical. You're like, damn, I'm gonna feel like I'm in the Matrix playing this.
I actually my mind's going in two different directions, but I'll real quick on the aesthetic, visual, music side. Have you ever played the cave game Pro Gear?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's the only cave game I've ever actually played, which makes me feel like a little bit of a
Really?
like
Yeah, you
I
gotta
know it
get
makes
on
me
some stuff.
like a poser, but it's the only one I've played. It's really cheap. It's like $2.
Yeah, yeah.
But the game is just stunningly beautiful, like from
It
the
is.
very
Yeah.
beginning. And that when you get to a boss fight, the profile picture of the boss comes out, and there's like these really cool portraits of them, and then they die, and they have like a kind of specialized image of them inside of their ship blowing up. And I'm like, this game doesn't have a wasted image, right? From the very beginning to the end. And I think that the shmup genre is the the quantity and quality ratio, like there's not very
Oh
many
yeah, it's
shmup.
insane.
Yeah, it's just crazy how dynamic and beautiful some of these games are. And I think you're right that the abstraction that it draws, the musician doesn't necessarily have to. The collaboration allows the freedom for the musician to be like, okay, I have to make 22 minutes of music, and it's got to be intense, right? And
Yeah,
then they
yeah,
can make it fun.
yeah, and usually they're like small teams, so you have the musician just working in an office nearby, and they're like, "Oh, listen to this cool idea," and you're like, "Damn, that slaps! Put that in game."
Yeah.
It's really creative and like fun environment, I imagine, and also insanely like inhumanly stressful, but yeah, still.
Yeah.
Have you played the Ninja Gaiden games, the reboots? You know, the Xbox one and all that
Yeah, I
stuff.
played the one on Xbox and really liked it back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. You know the ghost fish enemies?
Vaguely, yeah. Was a while ago for me, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they're extremely annoying enemies. And the legend, the myth about them is that the director said if you initially they were planned to be like this like prop, you know, a stage prop. They wouldn't be enemies. The director was like, okay, if you're gonna have this on the disc, make it a gameplay element. And I feel
Huh.
like that captures the arcade design mentality so well. You know, if it's
Yeah.
in the game, it must be something cool. You know,
Yeah, and I
because he
that's
himself,
exactly, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because a lot of those like old school Japanese, not old school, but like mid school, I don't know, just the PS2, Xbox era
Yeah.
designers, they were arcade boys. They played a lot of arcade games. They got a lot of their influences from that era. So and you can really see that in stuff like Devil May Cry, Ninja Gaiden, all that stuff. God Hand, of course.
Yeah. I never actually played God Hand either. I missed that one, but I heard it's
Oh,
really cool.
dude, you're gonna grow your backlog by the end of this. Gonna
Yeah. So I was gonna
quite a lot.
ask, um, Gunvein has some really cool mechanics. I mentioned the bomb, right? The picking up the pieces of the bomb to get a bomb, Um,
Yeah.
was that your idea? Did you come up with that?
Uh, no, well, partly. One of I got inspired by Rising games like Battle Garega and stuff because they have bomb fragments. You
Oh
collect, you
yeah, at
pick
the
up.
bottom where it fills
Yeah,
up
yeah,
the.
yeah. So it's like a hybrid between that and the medals of those games. So the idea is to just well, the main idea is that I like bombing because it can be used for offense when you want to do a lot of damage. It can be used for defense when you're like about to get cornered by a pattern. You can like bomb. It can be used to like set up certain stuff. And I wanted to expand that even more, so I had like a secondary bomb, which is the hyper. And you always get to these micro decisions. Or whether you want to bomb, which bomb you want to use, that kind of stuff. And then I wanted the fragments to be really dynamic. What I like is when shmups really force you to move around a lot on screen, And part of the reason I added fragments is because they give these like little. They add these little reprioritization moments where you're doing something and you see a fragment pop up. You're like, okay, do I keep killing this enemy or do I grab the fragment? Because they are static, they aren't random, but it's so hard to repeat the same fragment drop pattern that it always feels inconsistent and always keeps you on your toes.
Yeah,
That
and
was my idea behind it anyway.
I think it worked out really cool. I think it's a really
Thanks.
cool mechanic. Gunvein also has like the lock on, right? So you hold down the button
Yeah.
and it has like the little scanner come out. Um, and I noticed that you can scan like some random, at least maybe I'm missing it, but it feels like you can scan like little objects below, like in the background, and you can
Yeah,
lock
yeah.
onto them. Are those like a secret? Did you consider that like a secret in the game?
I wouldn't call it a secret. They're like they have a little flash if you pay attention to the background. There's like little flashes in the background, and that's where you lock on to. What I viewed them as is, boost pads in racing games. That's basically how I viewed them, where they
Oh,
lead you around the level in a way that I thought would be really smooth and kind of give you the different like conflicts. That comes back to the main design idea to always have the player move around and just get these like conflicting little priorities in the game.
now kind of opposite of us talking about shmups having the potential to be very cinematic and flashy. Gunvein is very intense. There's nearly constant enemy on attacks. Do you think shmups should consider having more abstract, open moments to kind of, um, you know, Do you think would you ever consider adding a more open moment of maybe nothing to a shmup game where you just see the background for a little bit, or do you like to keep it super intense?
I Uh, Personally, I like it super intense because some of my favorite shmups in terms of pacing are Psycho games. So like Gunbird 2, Dragon Blaze, that kind of stuff. You know,
Yeah,
Strikers, the Strikers games, and they are usually like 10 to 15 minutes long per loop. And they're so intense. Before you even get to kill an enemy, the next enemy already pops out. You're like, oh my god! Like the idea is to just constantly keep the intensity up, to keep the density up, and get you overwhelmed. But yeah, I think, but that's my personal preference. But I think like it doesn't line up too well with a lot of players, and I do think shmup should kind of have these lighter elements. But I don't think they should be nothing. I think they should, for example, be be parts where you're focused on like picking up scoring items, the kind of like light type of gameplay. I don't think there should be any moments where you just float around and just sit there, unless
just
they're
want to keep it
skippable, of
locked
course.
in, like keep the player at least doing something.
Yeah, yeah, like just add some simple enemies, some scoring pickups, that kind of stuff. Some like stuff to like if you have a lock on like Gunvein, just like stuff in the background. Just keep the player engaged because these games are not played once; they're replayed over and over and over. And even though these dynamic like scenes, they feel really nice on your first few playthroughs. They get really tired after
Yeah.
a while. You just get tired of that stuff.
That's a really good actually point because I've thought, maybe a moment of respite, kind of cinematic, letting the player drift for a moment. But you're right. If someone plays the game, if it's a 20-minute game and they play it for 2 or 3 years, that's a lot of drifting.
Yeah, a lot of drifting, and usually when you're restarting a lot of runs back to back, you're kind of frustrated, right? So,
Yeah.
so if the game like deprives you of gameplay, you're gonna get extra mad at it. But that's also a good reason to separate story modes from arcade modes, because you can have anything in story mode, because you only play that once or twice,
Yeah.
and then you can like cut all those sections out and tighten up the pacing for arcade mode. So that's like the perfect formula.
Now, this will be our last question, because
Yeah,
we're getting a little long, but I appreciate your time. You've played Ikaruga, right?
yeah,
So Ikaruga has a very minimal, abstract storyline. In between the moments of the shmup gameplay, there's these little moments where it has these little, poems almost that the player reads. And then there is some concept art, the watercolor images of the pilots and the ships. But there's no, as to my knowledge, no way to really pin down the story. I think of it as a game like Dark Souls, where a lot of the storyline is in the item descriptions and the loading. Um, do you think there's a creative or interesting way that a shmup could tell a really rich storyline or have a really rich lore without affecting the gameplay intensity of a shmup?
Well, usually well, yeah, the main thing you want to focus on is just like environmental and set piece storytelling. Uh, there's a lot of games that are really good at it, and of course, building a vibe. Rayforce, which I talked about, is extremely good at building like a really dark, kind of bleak atmosphere, like a sense of progression where each stage leads into the next with very minimal load times, and there's
Mm-hmm.
like a sense that you're starting in space and then flying into this like a desolate, AI controlled planet, and then you're going like inside of it, and you're like seeing the machine city built inside of a hollow planet, and it's really cool. Like there's a lot of these like narrative elements that you feel even though you don't completely understand, and I think that's the most important part, just giving that sense of like the world outside of what you're seeing in the game.
Yeah.
As Galuda games are also good at this, but I think shmups can just do anything as long as they make it skippable, right? You have
Yeah.
those Castle of Shikigami games on the PS1, PS1,
PS2,
PS2,
I think.
and Wii as well. Yeah, Wii as well. So those have like lengthy and pretty pretty awkwardly translated cutscenes. They're amazing, but amazing in the Resident Evil 1 way. And there's pretty lengthy cutscenes, like dialogue between bosses and stuff, and you can have all that, and as long as you make it skippable, it won't harm the pacing at all.
Yeah, yeah, that's a
And
good point. That
yeah,
would
an
be
idea
funny to have
had
like Metal Gear Solid style cutscenes that are longer than the actual game in a shmup.
Yeah, but then you just press start and it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, an idea I also had is just having hubs, central hubs. As long as as long as you just let the player continue with the gameplay quickly, you can just do anything. You can have them come back to the same central hub between levels, talk to some NPCs and stuff. Maybe even get like a weird side quest or something, especially in story mode. Like anything goes as long as the player can rush through it.
Yeah.
That's my idea.
No, I think that's actually probably the simplest and best way to do it. Anything goes as long as the player can skip it, and then trying to use that world building through the set pieces and through the like Ray Force sounds. I haven't seen it, but it sounds like a perfect way to do it. You have this
Oh yeah, I
kind of
think I
vague.
think Rayforce. Yeah, like, I think if you're playing like some kind of narrative-based shmup, that's usually going to be inspired by Rayforce and like Darius and all those games. Taito were really good about building these really amazing feeling set pieces and
Did
stuff.
Taito do Ray Force?
Yeah,
Oh
Rayforce is
wow.
Taito.
So they were
Yeah.
on it back in the day. They were really doing a
Oh,
good job.
absolutely. Yeah, they pumped out some really high budget like cinematic games almost.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
Bog Hog, do you have any last minute things you want to say to any of our listeners? Any games you want to recommend or anything like that?
Let me think about that for a second. Don't want to recommend any games.
Sorry to
Um,
put you on. We recommend
oh
Gunvein. I'll
boy.
say that. I like it, and if you want to support Bog Hog and NG Dev, check out Gunvein. It is very cool.
Yeah, and if you oh, okay, so I got some shout out. I got some interesting shout outs. So of course, the Electric Underground.
Yes.
There's also a video by James Chen, right, the fighting game guy, who hosted Daigo's shmup event where T3 Kamui she played Battle Garega with commentary by Soft Drink and you'll probably put this on screen, right, and a
Yeah,
link
yeah.
to it.
I'll look it up.
And
I'll put it on the screen.
yeah, yeah, and that video is amazing. If you don't know anything about Battle Garega or these like rising, really complicated shmups, Soft Drinks does such an amazing job breaking down all the gameplay elements and making them really easy to understand while commentating the run. And I think that'll be like anyone who's not into shmups will probably get a lot more interested in them after watching that. And then I want to shout out some of my favorite shmups, I suppose. So I love Gwange. I love Ketsui by Cave. I love Muchi Pork, and I love Psy Warrior Delta, of course.
Okay, sweet. Okay.
Definitely must plays. Yeah.
Did Mushi Pork inspire your, avatar, the pig?
No, but I played it a bit after. I played it for the first time after I got the Avatar, but it fits. Muchi Pork inspired a lot of Gunvein because it has similar kind of like resource stuff.
Interesting.
It,
All
yeah,
right.
it's a
Well, thank you, Bog Hog. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that you have all the success in the world on your next game. Again, I really appreciate your time.
thanks a lot.
All right. Well,
Thanks,
thank
yeah,
you.
and I hope the series goes well. Gotta get more devs in here, dude.
Oh yeah,
Gotta
thank you.
get those
Yeah,
sick.
yeah. The
Yeah, gotta
first
get those
episode.
six tips. Yeah.
This is like being the first person interviewed by Oprah or something like that. This is
True, yeah. It's gonna
great.
be looked back by the historians.
Yeah, I hope so. That'd be fun. All right.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Well, thanks, man. Have a good night.
All right, yeah. See ya.
See ya.
A good one.